Welcome to r/MaliciousCompliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. And today we have 3 great stories. So subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story. Despite my severe cold, I emphasized my commitment to work, persuading management never to doubt my health concerns again. The second story. OP's attempt to comply with a new protocol led to costly billing issues, missed deadlines, and the potential loss of $125,000 in revenue. The third story. I complied with the church leader's wishes and got expelled for standing up for myself. On to the first story. Hooray for management. This is a story about the worst cold I ever had, the worst job I ever had, and how my life loves to fill my dream experiences with an equal amount of crap. Many years ago, when the Nintendo Wii was still popular, my grandparents asked me to house sit for them for a week. This for me was awesome. They had a really nice 2-story house, and a really sweet dog, and only lived a town over from where my family and I lived, so I could get help from my parents if needed. It would be my first and so far only time living on my own for more than a day, and it was going to happen in a home far nicer than anything I could hope to afford on my own. Of course, I accepted. The only real issue was that I didn't have a car of my own yet, so I'd be forced to ride my bike to my only shift that week, and need my date that same night to pick me up. Unfortunately, tragedy struck, and if not for the nice home and the experience of doing things my way for a while, it would have been the worst week of my mostly uneventful life. I got very sick. Not pneumonia or the stomach flu, just a very, very bad cold. My first day was alright. I could feel something coming down, but it wasn't major. That night, though, I couldn't sleep. I was used to a single bed with a heavy quilt and a radio above my head softly playing music. What I had to deal with was a 2-person bed with very light blankets, and I had to use a different playlist on my tablet to even attempt to sleep. There was also a very big window with plenty of moonlight streaming in, where I was used to near pitch black. They had a bed downstairs that was more similar to my own, so I tried that, but the blanket was far lighter than it looked, and something about sleeping in an underground room with no window at all ended up freaking me out for some reason, so I found myself going back upstairs. I got maybe an hour of sleep tops that night. The rest of that day, my cold just kept getting worse. For the first time, some glands or whatever in my jaw got so swollen, I couldn't swallow comfortably, especially if I was swallowing food. My nose was constantly stuffy and runny at the same time, and no available medicine was helping much. Amidst this, I still had to walk the dog twice for at least an hour or 2 each day. I couldn't sleep quite right that night either, though I slept better than the previous night due to pure exhaustion, and being slightly more used to things. The third day was Wednesday. My work day, my date night. My cold was even worse. I had developed a fever, couldn't breathe through my nose, my focus was slow tunnel vision. I developed a plan. I worked in fast food for the most popular and successful chain in the world associated with the letter M, so there was no way they'd make me come in with my condition. I'd call out of work, spend as much time as possible resting and healing, and hope to be in better shape for the date later. I would have just called off everything, but it was my first date in over a year. And she had admitted to heavily considering another guy, but she wanted to give me a chance, and I didn't want to lose that chance to a common cold. So I got home from the early morning dog walk and called my workplace. I told them everything. They wanted me to come in anyway. They wouldn't budge on this, at least not without begging me first, which sucked because I'm a very loyal person. I hadn't gotten along with management for a while though, and decided I'd either earn their respect through hard work and dedication, or by shoving their ignorance in their face. I didn't have much of a choice anyway, right? So that's how I found myself riding my bike a mile or more in the hot sun, wearing an all-black uniform with a black hat, while sporting a fever, runny and stuffy nose, weak physical strength, etc., to go work as a cashier in the most active and overworked fast food joint in the city for what was planned to be several hours straight. Needless to say, I didn't last long. My coworkers could tell I wasn't in a very good condition when I arrived, but management had begged me to come in knowing the risks, so I was determined to stay. About an hour in, I had reached the point of actual exhaustion. Any physical exertion made me sick to my stomach, and it was taking all my focus to stay on my feet and properly help customers. My coworkers noticed, my managers took notice, and finally, a replacement was called in, and I was given the rest of the night off. I ended up hobbling to an empty bench and curling up on it in discomfort. There was no way I could ride my bike back at this point, so I had to call my dad to pick me up. I also sadly had to call off the date. I spent the next few hours in my own bed sleeping my butt off, before eating some homemade dinner later that night, and going back to my grandparents' place to finish the house sitting. Thankfully, I slowly got better after that. My workplace never questioned my physical health again. Mental health is a different story, though I quit when that became an issue, and I'm pretty sure at least one of my bosses apologized for putting me in that position that day. I imagine they found themselves hoping they didn't start a mini pandemic by making me come into work. I'm terribly sorry to any victims who caught my cold, but thankfully as bad as it was still just a cold, and anyone going to that store at that hour probably wasn't going to be screwed over by it. As an aftermath to the rest of the experience, the next 2 days were better. I was almost back to full health by the last day of house sitting, and my date, though she had devoted herself to the other guy, felt bad and offered to reschedule our date as just a day to hang out as friends, which I accepted because I had nothing better to do. We're still friends to this day, and last I recall, none of those managers are still working at that store, except perhaps the head manager who wasn't involved in that fateful day. In hindsight, I really should have just quit, but it was my only job at the time and my loyalty convinced me not to. The next story is, I was taking too many liberties. I'm a bookkeeper working for a law firm, specializing in receivables and trust accounting, keeping track of what money in the trust and account belongs to whom, and what we can do with it. We also work for a lot of insurance companies on their specialty lines. For example, if a bank makes an insurance claim because it discovered one of its clients was running a Ponzi scheme through their accounts, but insurance refuses to pay out because bank employees were involved, which is excluded by the policy, and the bank sues over this, we would represent the insurance company. Insurance companies have lots of rules for how you bill them, words you can and cannot use, activities you can and cannot bill, etc. And it's part of my job to know these guidelines and make sure our bills are compliant with them. Unfortunately, many of these insurance companies use a third-party administrator, TPA, to review their bills and adjust them if not in compliance with the guidelines, and they're often wrong. This leads to appeals, which have their own requirements that I also must know. The result of all this is that in order to get these bills done properly and collect as much as possible on them, it takes a lot of communication with our vendors and lawyers, and the claims counsel at the insurer. For most of my time at this firm, I've simply reached out as needed to anyone I need to clear up billing issues, and keep the issues requiring a lawyer's attention to a minimum. Additionally, nearly all the claims counsel have told me to reach out to them as needed for billing issues. The lawyer's value is in providing advice to our clients, not in billing minutia that I am perfectly capable of dealing with, and my job is to support them by dealing with the minutia, or so I thought. It turns out a bunch of lawyers were unhappy with me reaching out to claims counsel whenever I needed to, and not making the request to the lawyer to reach out to claims counsel for whatever I needed. Okay, fine. It's not like I don't have other work to keep me busy for the rest of time. You want to deal with this SH, you go ahead. Needless to say, the lawyers were and still are completely oblivious to the amount of work my job entails. I guess that's my fault for doing a good job all these people years. So far, we've missed several appeal deadlines, resulting in about $25,000 in foregone revenue. There's a method for most insurers for appeals after the fact, but it doesn't really work for, we didn't email you before the deadline. Would you please approve it now anyway? The managing partner asked me if we could do an appeal after the fact. He spent a week working out how to say, yeah, it's our fault, but would you please still fix it for us? There's another $25,000 in appeals due on Monday, which we need claims counsel to approve, so the TPAs will process the appeal, and the lawyer who has to get me the approval is away Thursday and Friday. There's another probably $50K in appeals on other files, which are due by the end of the month. I could fix everything with a couple of phone calls, but I'm not allowed to make them. Claims counsel won't reach out to me unless they need to. I dropped enough hints that they understand what's happening, and are supporting my malicious compliance, so we're both watching the clock tick down. I wish I had $125,000 to toss away because I didn't want to let someone make a phone call. Edit. In this particular case, an institutional client said they were waiting for a coverage opinion and would pay us if denied. Fine. They do this a couple times a year. Usually they're approved and usually the insurer pays us. Only this time they took 6 months to confirm coverage. Then we had to do the assessment and budget, but the lawyers took forever to do that for some unknown reason, and the budget can't be approved without the assessment. Without an approved budget, you can't submit invoices. But we're still working, still invoicing, they just aren't going anywhere. It's also a lot of work, probably $1,500,000 a year in fees. The third story is malicious compliance equals excommunication. So this happened quite some years ago when I was living in Utah. Now, first thing most people think of when they hear that is Mormon and LDS, or whatever they would like to go by. I was in my last year of high school, and my family had decided to move to another city. I didn't want to start all over with new people for one more year of school, so I found out that one of my friend's family was willing to take me in for the year with just a couple stipulations, one of which was that I would have to attend church every Sunday with them. I'm not very religious, but I'm not going to let that stop me, so I agreed. Shortly after, the family took me to the church to introduce me to the bishop and to explain the situation to him. Now, starting out, he wasn't too bad, because he was new to the area as well, but as the months passed, it started to get worse and worse. He turned into one of those leaders that were like, "This isn't God's house, it's mine, and you'll do as I say while you're here." Near the end of the school year, he comes up to me, doesn't say hello or anything, and tells me I have to give a talk on Sunday. Now, I'm a 17-year-old boy and hate being told that I have to do something, and most times I'll do the opposite out of spite. You can ask me and I'll consider it, but I don't have to do anything. With that in mind, I politely say, "No thank you, I don't like speaking in public." He looks me in the eye and says, "You don't understand. If you don't, I'm kicking you, your friend, and his family out of the church." Now, my friend and his family have been taking care of me for the past year and have treating as one of their own the entire time, so I cave and say fine. Please keep in mind they're religious and I'm not, and I didn't want to mess up something that they enjoyed. Me: "What do you want me to talk about?" Bishop: "Based on what I have taught you, I want you to tell everyone what your beliefs are in this church." With my inner smart a-hole doing backflips at this point, I answer with a slight smile. I can do that. Sunday comes, and halfway through he gets to the podium and asks if there was anyone who'd like to come up and bear witness. There were a couple of people who got up and said their piece, and then he motioned to me that now was the time. So I got up to the podium and stated that my name is blank, and based on what the bishop has taught me, I believe that this church is nothing but a lie, and anyone who follows it is following nothing but another cult. We hear someone who says that they have spoke to God, and we think that they're crazy, but the founder, Joseph Smith, says it and has 2 gold bricks to prove it, and all of a sudden he's a prophet. That doesn't make sense to me. So you can all go on believing what you want. I'm done with this. As I go to leave, I feel a hand come down hard on my shoulder and get forcibly turned around just to see the bishop there red-faced, and with his hand raised as though he was going to slap me. So I do the first thing that comes to mind and defend myself by kicking as hard as I could from the awkward angle and catch him right between the legs. He drops and I sprint out of there. By the time I make it back to my friend's house, the entire family is there and they're peeved. When they finally calm down enough to hear me out, I explain everything to them. They ask me why I didn't say anything earlier, and I really didn't have an answer for them. Gotta love the teenage mind. Cut to a couple weeks later, and I receive a letter in the mail from the Quorum of 12. I guess they're like the people in charge and not sure if that's how it's even spelled, stating that I'm no longer welcome in that or any other LDS church. No skin off my nose, but since it was a condition of my staying there, I ended up having to leave early. Hope you love these stories. Subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching and have a good day.